We're in a new series to do some longer endings on called Faith in Technicolor, following the life of Joseph. Started off with Joseph receiving the dream coat, right, and bragging about a couple of dreams that weren't so nice to his brothers.
Sure.
Had you had more time, it was a packed service, so you probably had to do some cutting, but had you had more time, what would have made it in?
Yeah, it's like I told you and some others. I might have even mentioned it in a sermon. You know, when you're setting up a new sermon series, you know, there's just a lot of groundwork to be laid, a lot of details to share, and I had a lot of material going into Sunday, and kind of had to pick and choose the best I could. And you know, I tried to pick the things that really illustrate the greater, you know, point that we're trying to make in the series, and the lesson that that we're trying to teach and to learn, and that's about kind of from our perspective, the two sides of God's providence. So you know, when we think about God's providence, we think about, you know, fortuitous circumstances and good things happening at just the right time,
Yeah.
and you know, we're really quick to attribute that to God's providence. But you know, in the life of Joseph and in the greater life of God's people of that time, you know, God's providence manifested itself in some pretty difficult ways, and so I kind of wanted to pick and choose the things that we're going to set us up to talk about that. Yeah.
It's funny, I went a similar direction at adult Sunday school after the service.
Okay.
That we were talking about Babel, that even God's judgment in confusing the speech and separating the people, that was a judgment. Even that, the addition of language and people groups, is a blessing.
Yeah.
It is fortuitous. So when you come back around in Revelation or at Pentecost and you say, are all the languages summed back up into whatever Adam spoke? Or are we all Greek speakers now? No, we all retain our language and our tribe and our nation,
Yeah.
but under the Lordship, united in Christ.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about what blessing really is. Even judgment is blessing.
Yeah. And it's really huge. And, you know, one of the things that I probably would have talked about had I had more time that was very interesting for me to research on, I did want to lay out the greater purposes that God is working towards when Joseph hits the scene. And that stems back to two promises to Abraham. One,
Sure.
that he was going to make his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and make them into a great nation. The other one was, you know, this prophecy, or this revelation of God in Genesis 15, where he says, you know, your descendants will go down to a land that is not their own and be oppressed and mistreated for 400 years, and then I will bring them back out and punish those who oppress them. And it's interesting, the part of that prophecy that I didn't read, that the part of that revelation that I didn't read, says, you know, for the time of the Amorites, or the measure of the Amorites' sin is not yet complete. And so, you know, God's providence is, you know, already working through centuries. And incidentally, the place where Joseph's brothers are grazing their sheep is in Amorite territory. And so it says that they were close to Dothan. And I read a little, I don't remember where it was from, whether it was a commentary or an article, but archaeologists have actually found where Dothan is, and they have, you know, excavated some of it, and they found at where they thought the city gates would be the remains of little children. And so just kind of an indication of what the Amorites were up to during the time of Joseph and his brothers.
Sure.
Child sacrifices, you know, sacrifices at the erecting of the gates of the city, that sort of thing. And so, you know, God's providence is in effect not just for Abraham's descendants, but God's providence really encompasses the entire world, and it, like you mentioned, it includes his judgment as well as his blessings. And ultimately, we know that God is going to use this family to bless all peoples and all nations. So it's just really kind of exciting and interesting stuff.
I'm looking forward to the rest of it.